Is your hobby of making felt flowers starting to take over your home? That's what happened to me before I made the decision to start selling my felt flowers on the internets to all of you all. So here is basically a good rundown of how to get started in selling your felt flowers. First things first, you need to start mastering your craft, or mastering at least a few flowers that you feel so confident and you're like, these are golden child's felt flowers that you feel confident enough to sell to the public. So start small. Don't try to get a gigantic catalog of flowers right off the bat. I would master no more than 5 flowers to get you self-started. Start with mastering those 5 felt flowers till they could not be any more perfect. So start making them, start gifting them to your friends and family, start making bouquets, and then I want you to start testing their durability. I want you to throw a few in a shipping box and ship them back to yourself. I want you to make one and test them in 2 weeks and start kind of trying to pull at the flower and see if it falls apart. I want you to test if the shape starts falling apart. I want you to, every single thing that you could do to put it in the worst situations possible so that you could see how durable your flowers are gonna hold up. Make sure you do all of this stuff first because you do not want to run into those problems while you're trying to sell a flower. You don't want angry customers being like, I've had my flower for 3 days and it's already falling and losing its shape. You don't want them being like, it got in the sun and started changing colors on me. Or you don't want to ship something to a customer and it completely deformed and icky and smushed. So all of these things you need to think about before you get started. So first things first, pick your 5 favorite flowers, or start less if you feel more comfortable with 3, and put them through the test and make them perfect. Next thing you're gonna wanna do is kind of decide where you wanna get started. Etsy is a really good place to start. They're gonna drive a lot of traffic for you. I'm not gonna get into the ins and outs of how to sell any of this stuff because there are 800 billion YouTube videos all over the place on how to train you in Etsy, Shopify. I think Michael's now has a maker site to sell things. There's a few other areas that you can sell things. I'm not going to go into any of that because it's already been spoken 8 billion times, and I wouldn't even call myself an expert in, say, like how to sell Etsy. I think with my felt flower business, I got lucky in a sense because I was probably one of the first 5 flower makers out there that was really starting to push out flowers. So there wasn't a ton of competition, and so it definitely pushed me to the top of the list, and I've been doing it for so many years that my sales count's high and Etsy is rewarding me with just traffic. So just know when you're gonna get started, there is a lot of competition. So that is exactly why I want you to make sure that your product is going to actually sell itself with its quality versus, just being another person in the queue of things. You wanna come out strong. So figure out exactly where you're going to sell first. I would definitely start with Etsy, but then move, or if you wanted to do a website, then go make a website. So keep in mind with where you're gonna sell them to as far as pricing. So Etsy's gonna take a bigger cut than your Shopify store, but Shopify store, you're gonna have to drive all your own traffic. So keep in mind your price structure. So the way I like to price my flowers is one of 2 things. First, what I do is I kind of time myself from start to finish on how long it's gonna take me to do a flower. Mind you, if you're making 3 of the same flower, it's gonna be a little bit faster. If you're making 5 of the same flower, you're gonna be a little bit faster because when you're cutting out the materials, you're like, I'm cutting enough for 5 flowers versus cutting 1 of this flower, 1 of this flower, 1 of this flower, like your efficiency is gonna go down. So time yourself from start to finish on doing 1 flower from the very beginning of just gathering the materials to cutting it to processing it to actually building the flower. That way you know exactly what your time is worth. Next, I want you to decide how much your time is worth. So give yourself an hourly wage. So say you want to make $10 an hour. Say you want to make $60 an hour. Keep that in mind. So you spend 15 minutes start to finish on a flower. You want to get paid $60 an hour. So therefore, that's $15 worth of your time put to that 1 flower. So just put that number a little bit to the side. Now, I want you to decide how much your materials cost. So kind of break that down. How much money did I spend on my materials? And then put that number. Say it's because you're cutting and not using like a full sheet of felt, just do a generalization. You probably used, 20 cents of materials. So put that aside. And then you put a felt ball in it. So that's another like $1. So you just used $1.50's worth of material. And you gotta think wire, you gotta think glue, all of that stuff. So let's just say overestimate, I put $5 worth of material. That's probably way more material than you put in, but at least you know that's a safe starting number. So now you're at $20 that you've put into this flower. Now, I would go on and research what the market is holding. So now that there's so many flower makers out there, it's so easy to jump on Etsy and do some research. So I'm making a daisy. On paper, right now, your cost is at $20 for that daisy. Now you need to see what the market can even yield. So if you find similar daisies from 3 other makers, I mean, you don't want to be exactly the same, but if you find something similar in the same vein, you'd be like, okay, well, they're charging $10 for that flower. Great. That's the average that 3 other people are selling it, $10 to $15 for that one single daisy stem. Great. Now you have to think, okay, what's their skill level? Is their skill level higher than mine? Is it lower than mine? Kind of judge that as well, because that's also going to phase into your pricing structure. These are just general things to think about, because what if their skill level is significantly higher than yours? That $12 daisy that they're charging, may take you 15 minutes to make, but it's probably taking them 5 minutes to make, just because their muscle memory, they've made 7,000 of them and they're just faster at it, so they can yield a lower price point for it. So these are the things that you need to be putting into your pricing bowl per se. You have yours set at $20. The market's yielding around $12. And also, you kind of want to put some profit margin on yours too, right? So add another 10% to 50% on top of that. So now you're at $40 versus $15. That's where you have to marry them and find the great balance. So you're at $40, they're at $12. Can you meet somewhere in the middle? Either you need to think about it in a few different ways. Is my quality better? Is my shipping better? Is my time frame better? Can I maybe yield this flower at $15 to $18 and be happy with that? Or do I need to just say, maybe I'm not gonna get paid what I want to get paid, or maybe this isn't for me. So it's all about where the market will yield with what you're requiring. The other caveat to this was the baseline of, say, oh my gosh, I think my time is worth $700 an hour and I need to be charging, $100 per flower kind of caveat, and I'm being very exaggerative. But the complete opposite to that is that you do not want to race to the bottom either. So let's say the market is yielding that daisy for $12. You do not want to come in at like $6, $7. Multiple reasons. 1, you're going to get overloaded and your quality is going to start tanking. 2, you're just going to force the whole market of felt flowers to drop. That's going to hurt every single other felt flower maker as well, because now they're going to have to compete with you on that low price. Now they're going to have to start dropping their prices because they're losing sales. And then everybody loses. So if you kind of come in and match them, say they're at $12 and you're like, oh, my quality's less and I don't value my time as much or whatever, and you want to come in at 10, that's completely reasonable. But never go crazy with being like, well, I'm gonna sell it for $6 and I'm gonna steal all the sales, because that really will ultimately hurt you down the line when you're like, I wanna raise my prices, but you can't because the market can't yield it anymore because you've taught it, in essence, to value that flower at only $6 now. So keep that in mind, because you definitely want to do enough research about pricing your flowers so that you are staying well within the circle of what the market can yield and what other people are pricing. So yeah, you could stay a few percentages higher, you can do a few percentages lower, but don't go drastically low. That just really hurts everybody. If you want to go drastically high and you get sales from that, awesome. I think that's a great strategy. Another thing that you need to think about and consider is, once you start growing your shop, materials. Where can you find them in bulk? Where can you find them wholesale to lower your costs to get better prices on your materials? And keep in mind though, when you're first starting, that could be really, really scary, because you're just like, oh my gosh, I have to spend $500 or thousands of dollars on materials to buy them in bulk. Am I willing to invest that right off the bat? So as you grow, your materials will grow, and then you can potentially lower your costs by buying more in bulk. Like, I'll just give you a reference. I ordered, I don't know, maybe 50,000 felt balls recently just to restock everything, and I think that was around like $1,500. And I have 50,000 felt balls because that was the minimum order requirement that I had to do. So keep that in mind. Where are you gonna store this stuff? And you have to have room to grow in that direction, but starting off, I would probably steer away from buying bulk. With that being said, I order in bulk. I have lots of materials on my site with competitive pricing, so if you wanted to go check out my site and get started with materials, go check that out. Next thing I wanna make sure that you're getting at is photos. So whenever you're selling anything, be sure to hyper focus on your sales photos. If they're garbage, you're gonna lose your customer in like about 10 seconds. Probably less than that, 2 seconds, probably a second. If it's a garbage photo, they're gonna scroll on by. The prettier the photo is going to sell the flower. So you could have 2 different photos. One is an expensive, amazing, beautiful flower with terrible lighting, or a cheaper flower that has maybe less quality, less experience, but a beautiful photo. That one's gonna sell hands down. Last thing I want to hit on, because that was a lot of information, is that all of my digital downloads for flowers that I make can 100% be used to sell your flowers. The only thing I ask is that you don't resell all of the instructions or patterns itself, but all of your finished products that you make from my digital downloads and all the flowers I teach you, you can totally sell. So keep that in mind. If you wanted to start your business, you have definitely a huge plethora of options to get started on manufacturing flowers that you love. So last things last, this is, I think, the hardest thing for people to come to terms with when they start selling their products. This hobby of yours is no longer a hobby. It is a business, and you need to treat it as such. It will get to a point, sadly, where making flowers is not gonna fulfill that creative need in your heart anymore to bring you that, like, I was creative today joy. I highly suggest, if you're gonna make felt flowers for a business, try snagging another hobby that will keep you sharp and happy, like painting, for instance, just so that you're just keeping sharp with your joy and creativity, because sadly, felt flowers now are a business and it needs to be separate. It's no longer your hobby to fill your needs and joy. I'm not saying it's not fun and it will fill needs and joy, but when you're forced to work on an order, it's not as fun as when you're just like, I am freely creating to just create beautiful things. So keep that in mind. I want you to make sure that you are protecting yourself, because there is such easy way to get burnout really, really fast. I think all creatives meet that, find the burnout fast whenever they start a business from their hobby. So just make sure that you have separate business accounts to keep all of that money separate, keep track of all your supplies and for tax reasons, and just be sure to do it right the first time. All right, so if you have any questions about anything I talked about, I've been doing this for multiple years, so feel free to drop them in the comments below, and I would be more than happy to answer your questions if you want to get started in selling felt flowers. So at this point, this is your cue to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you're not missing any more videos. And if you need a follow-up on more specific questions that you want answered, drop them in the comments. Also, check out my website, check out my pricing structure and how I do things on my website and my Etsy and all of that stuff. Study it, don't copy it, find your happy place where you can live with that. Bye!